Denzel Washington settled onto the plush couch of Bill Maher's studio set, the bright lights casting a warm glow on his familiar face, his easy smile disarming the audience as the show kicked off with its usual rhythm. Casual banter about Hollywood, the grind of making films, and the craft of acting, with Denzel's deep, measured voice carrying the weight of his decades in the industry, each anecdote landing with the polish of a man who'd told these stories before, but still made them feel fresh. The crowd laughing at his quip about dodging bad scripts like landmines. Bill leaning back in his chair, smirking, tossing in his signature jabs at Tinseltown's excess, the vibe light. Almost too comfortable, like a well-rehearsed dance, but then something shifted. A subtle crack in the air when Bill, with that glint in his eye, leaned forward and said, "Denzel, you're a man of faith, I know that, so I gotta ask, can you take off that cross necklace for the show, just while you're here?" The question landing like a pebble in still water, ripples spreading as Denzel's smile faltered, his hand instinctively brushing the small silver cross at his neck. A gift from his mother decades ago, the audience stirring, a few murmurs breaking the silence. Denzel tilting his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. Not angry yet, but sizing Bill up, saying, "This stays on, Bill, it's not a prop." His tone calm but firm, the crowd splitting, some clapping in support, others shouting for him to take it off, egged on by Bill's raised eyebrow, the host shrugging, playing it off with a chuckle. All right, let's move on." But the tension hung there, thick, unshakable, as the conversation veered back to movies. Though Denzel's posture stiffened, his answers shorter, his gaze occasionally flicking to Bill with a quiet challenge. And Bill, never one to let a moment die, kept poking. Not overtly, but with that sly edge, tossing out quips about Hollywood's savior complex that felt aimed, the audience laughing nervously, sensing the undercurrent. And then Bill went for it, leaning in again, his voice sharp now. "You've said God guides your life, Denzel. So what, you really think God handed you that Oscar while millions of kids starve out there?" The question a blade, meant to cut. The crowd gasping, some cheering, others booing, the studio crackling with raw energy, Denzel pausing, his jaw tightening, but his response came steady, deliberate. "Bill, I don't think God's in the business of handing out trophies, but I know he's in the business of giving purpose. My Oscar doesn't feed kids, but the work I do, the stories I tell, maybe they shine a light." His words landing with quiet power, diffusing the moment but not the friction. Bill's smirk twitching, the audience roaring, split down the middle. Some moved by Denzel's conviction, others hungry for more blood. The air electric with what wasn't said. The unspoken challenge between two men who'd spent their lives commanding attention, neither willing to back down. The show barreling toward a breaking point that hadn't yet arrived, but you could feel it coming. A storm brewing just out of sight, and you knew. Whatever happened next, it wasn't going to be small, so stick around. This story's worth it. The studio air grew thicker, the audience's murmurs swelling into a restless hum as Denzel Washington leaned forward on the couch, his eyes locked on Bill Maher, the weight of his earlier response. Calm, measured, but razor-sharp, still hanging between them, Bill's smirk now a tight line, his fingers drumming on the desk, betraying a flicker of unease, though his voice stayed sharp, dripping with that familiar sardonic edge as he pivoted, trying to reclaim the room. "Come on, Denzel, don't get all preacher on me, it's just a show. Let's keep it fun." But the crowd wasn't buying the deflection, some cheering Denzel's name, others heckling, a woman in the back shouting, "Let him keep the cross," while another voice barked, "Take it off, man, it's just jewelry." The split energy feeding the growing storm, Denzel's hand resting on his knee, steady, but his gaze unyielding, like a man who'd faced worse than a snarky talk show host. And then he struck, his voice low, deliberate, cutting through the noise. "You always mock believers, Bill. Tear 'em down like it's your cardio, but let me ask you something. When you're laughing, what's it really about? That feeling of being above it all? Or maybe, just maybe, a little fear that God might actually be real?" The question landed like a gut punch, the audience erupting, gasps and cheers colliding, Bill's face twitching, caught off guard. His usual quick wit stumbling as he leaned back, barking a laugh that sounded forced. "Fear? Nah, Denzel, I just don't buy the fairy tale." But the words lacked their usual bite, and the crowd sensed it, their energy tilting toward Denzel, who didn't flinch, his stare holding Bill's, a silent dare. the host's cool unraveling as he snapped, "Look, this is my show, okay? You want to preach? Fine, but take off that cross or get off my stage." The ultimatum slicing through the room, the audience roaring, some booing Bill, others egging him on, the tension now a living thing. Denzel's jaw tightening, his fingers brushing the cross again. Not out of doubt, but like a man grounding himself. The moment stretching taut, the camera zooming in on his face, catching the flicker of something. Anger, resolve, maybe both. As he leaned closer, his voice steady but laced with fire. "You think this is about a necklace, Bill? This is about who I am, and I don't take that off for anybody, not even you." The crowd exploding, some leaping to their feet, the applause drowning out Bill's attempt to interject, his face reddening as he tried to steer back. All right, let's cool it." But Denzel wasn't done, his next words quieter, sharper. "You push people to strip away what matters to them, but what's left of you when the laughs stop, Bill? What's your truth?" The question hanging, unanswered, as Bill fumbled, tossing out a weak jab about Hollywood egos. But it fell flat, the audience now fully in Denzel's corner. Their cheers a wave, Bill's control slipping, his eyes darting to the producers offstage, signaling for a commercial break. But Denzel stayed planted, his presence commanding, the room alive with the weight of what had just happened. The conflict raw, unresolved, the air crackling with the promise of more to come, because this wasn't just a spat. It was two men, two worlds, colliding on live TV, and whatever came next, you couldn't look away. This was a story that demanded you see it through. The studio lights burned hotter, the audience's roar a pulsing wave as Denzel Washington sat unflinching on the couch, his presence a quiet storm against Bill Maher's faltering control. The host's earlier ultimatum, take off the cross or leave, still echoing, unanswered, the air taut with anticipation, every eye locked on Denzel, his hand resting lightly on the silver cross at his neck. Not a gesture of defiance, but of certainty. The crowd split yet leaning harder into his corner, their cheers drowning Bill's attempt to pivot, his voice cracking as he tried to reclaim the narrative. "Okay, Denzel, let's not turn this into a sermon. People came for a show." But the jab landed weak, the audience jeering, a man in the front row yelling, "Let him speak," while another shouted, "Bill, you're out of line." The energy chaotic, electric, Denzel's gaze steady, cutting through the noise like a blade, his silence louder than the room's clamor. And then he leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate, each word carved with precision. "Bill, you live in a world where everything's irony, everything's a punchline, but let me ask you this. When the lights go out, when you're alone, in those moments of real pain, can you honestly say you've never looked up and asked for help?" The question hung like smoke, heavy, unanswerable, the audience gasping, some clapping, others frozen, Bill's face paling, his smirk gone, his eyes darting as if searching for an escape. The room silent for a heartbeat before erupting again, Denzel rising from the couch, his movement slow, deliberate, no theatrics, just a man done with the game, the cross glinting under the lights as he turned, walking off the set without a backward glance, Bill stammering, "All right, we'll be right back." But the words drowned in the crowd's roar, some booing the host, others chanting Denzel's name, the cameras scrambling to follow his exit, the stage manager signaling frantically for a commercial break. But the damage was done, the moment raw, irrevocable, the show cutting to ads as the audience buzzed, the tension spilling beyond the studio walls. Outside, as Denzel stepped into the cool night air, a swarm of journalists descended, their cameras flashing, Emick shoving forward, voices overlapping. "Denzel, why'd you walk off? What happened in there?" And he paused, his face unreadable, the cross still at his neck, his voice calm but edged with steel as he said, "I'm not coming back to that man's show." The words landing like a verdict, the reporters scribbling, cameras zooming, one bold voice asking, "What's next for you and Bill?" But Denzel was already moving, sliding into a waiting car, the door shutting with a soft thud, leaving the question unanswered. The night swallowing him as the crowd outside the studio grew, some holding signs. "We stand with Denzel," the story already spreading like wildfire across social media, clips of the exchange trending, hashtags like Josh Denzel walks and Bill Maher flops exploding. The next day's headlines brutal. Bill's ratings tanked, his show bleeding viewers, posts on X calling it a self-inflicted wound, Maher pushed too far, while Denzel's stock rose. Fans and strangers alike praising his conviction, his refusal to bend. Op-eds dissecting the clash as a cultural flashpoint, faith versus cynicism, authenticity versus spectacle. Yet Denzel stayed silent. No interviews, no statements, just a man who'd drawn a line and walked away, leaving the world to grapple with what it meant. The story unfinished, the fallout still unfolding. Bill's team scrambling to spin the narrative, but the truth lingered in that final question, unanswered, haunting, a challenge not just to Bill but to everyone watching. And you couldn't turn away, because this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The weight of it all promising something bigger still to come.